bringing focus towards the future of work in terms of the direction, in terms of bringing everything together and highlighting the role of HR and its importance in determining the direction in which the organization has to move. Now we move forward to a dialogue on the future of leadership. And for this particular dialogue, which will happen in the shape of a panel discussion, we have with us the gentleman who will moderate this dialogue, Mr. Sajjeed Aslam, Country Head Pakistan ACCA. And before I invite him over here, let me introduce you to the panelists as well. We have with us a very eminent set of panelists for this particular dialogue. The first one is Mr. Robert Nichols, Managing Director, Africa and Middle East, 3M. Robert joined 3M in 1987 and began his career in a sales role in ITB selling industrial adhesives before proceeding to hold many different functional leadership roles across sales, marketing, and general management, both in his home market of UK and across EMEA. Robert holds a master's degree in international marketing from Brunel University, London, and he is with us for this particular very important session. Alongside Robert, we have Carol Ariano. Most of us hopefully are familiar with this name. Carol is responsible to provide strategic human resource leadership and development for Aga Khan University as it continues to grow geographically and through offering new programs and services in education and health services. Carol joined AQ as Vice President Human Resources in April 2008 and is a Canadian national and has almost 40 years of diverse experience, including executive and leadership roles and positions, both in Pakistan as well as internationally. So Carol is also with us. And last but not the least, we have with us for this panel discussion Mr. Stuart Dunlop, Regional Director, Middle East, South Asia, ACCA. As a Regional Director at ACCA, Mr. Dunlop is responsible for the growth and operation of ACCA's business throughout the Middle East and South Asia market. He leads on developing thought leadership and providing strategic direction to the global body in this important market. I request all three of the panelists, along with the moderator of this particular panel discussion, Mr. Sajjeed, to please come over on the stage. Over to you, Sajjeed.
Okay, so I think we have discussed a lot around what is driving the change and some of the priorities, and now this panel specifically designed to discuss what's happening in their organization, how the changes are really affecting some of the strategic priorities, which we can foresee here that a lot of other organizations are going through the similar process. So how we are handling and creating a responses, whether we are talking about the exponential growth or a 10x growth, which we are talking about, the concepts of mindsets, the issue with the talent, the individual choices, behaviors, and how the work will look like. And we talk about that leadership a lot. And that's one of a conversation which takes place a lot in ACCA. We, as our function and the role is to create those leaders who can really provide the necessary leadership, business acumen, and ethical practices and ensure the compliances are happening around the world. And so it's not only the technical competency, but the skill around how they can provide that leadership is a very important component. And in this world, while we are talking about the leadership, that concept is getting very, very confused. We are talking about the people will not be there who we used to lead. They will be working remotely. The money may not be the factor, authority may not be the factor. We are looking for purpose. We are looking for satisfaction. People are working where they can learn better rather than earn better. So I think that's quite a different kind of environment and the world we are looking for. So the questions we have right now, which we will try to explore with our panel, is more around the quantum and the velocity of the change which is happening around us, how it's changing the strategic priorities for the organization to still stay relevant for the customers, and that now customers include employees as well. Other key question is, what are the key leadership challenges and opportunities which are being discussed in the boardroom right now? What's happening there? Do we really understand the challenge now or the opportunities? And another question which we will be bringing out is, what would be the role of leadership in future and how it's going to be different, if any, from today? And the last question which we'll try to explore, what are the key intervention which this panel can think ahead to develop the future leader? That's the questions which we came up with, but if you can pick up your mobile and you just go and log into Slido again, sli.do, and use the event code FOL, Future of Leader, FOL. If you can log into Slido, sli.do, and use the event code FOL, so we will be guided by your questions as well, and that will be our opportunity to really build upon the perspective which exists within the hall as well. So thank you very much for panel. Thank you, Carol, Stuart, and Robert. Carol, I'll start with yourself, opening up the question. I think while you're working in the education sector, and then the HR is one of our expertise, and you have seen the rest of the world, how it's happening around the world. So how this quantum and velocity of change is shaping the strategic priorities for Archon universities right now, or Archon as a group, and how you are planning to stay relevant for your customer, whether it's students, customer, or employees.
That's a number of questions there, I think. First of all, I would say that I have the distinct privilege of working for an organization that's always had purpose and the development of capacity at its heart. So our mission is the development of human capacity, and we've always, because of being a university, been working on doing that by developing the people who deliver, but also developing the people that we teach. So that's been a huge advantage. We are a head office organization started in Pakistan. It's 36 years old now. And we can also proudly say that of 12,000 employees who are here in Pakistan, only 14 are from out of the country. Everyone else is from here. Most of them are long service employees. We do have lots of people who are 35 and 25 and such years, so that's something that we'll certainly need to wrestle with as we change. But because they've been learning at that institution, because they've grown and had their experience there, we've been able to develop our own, many of our own leaders. But how do we do that and keep it relevant internationally is by tons of engagement with the rest of the world. Lots of partnerships that involve certification, lots of guests who come with a specialty in labs or a specialty in physiotherapy, who come from other places, talk to us about what we're doing and teach us, and we teach them too. And the most exciting part about what's happening now is that as we've evolved, we now have much to work on with faculty and researchers and such from the rest of the world to discover new technology, to discover new ways to deal with diseases in a certain way, but to help to teach the world what we learn from this population, from 1 million patients a year, from whatever. So the velocity is something we've always had to chase. We've always been trying to keep a standard, and I think that's something that's important for all corporations, to look at having standards and how to develop people to meet those standards and not say, you can't do that here, this is Pakistan. You've got to understand, we can't learn that. We're not customer focused here, we're going to do something else. That can't be our way, to keep the standard, but also learn it, and then once we know it, to take it to another level and teach the rest of the world those things too. The extent to which people feel like they're learning, they have purpose, they have a good reason for being where they are, but also that they could be hooked into something where they would teach the rest of the world too, makes it quite exciting to be at our institution, to be whether a student or to be an employee or to be a member of our faculty.
If I summarize, it's a learning culture which is really driving and keeping you up to date. Just another question popping up is around how much digitization in the customer engagement or employee engagement exists within your organization at the moment?
It's kind of like saying, who's satisfied with their pay? Is there ever enough? So we have quite a bit, and we've got just recently we've engaged a chief data analytics officer. Our last CIO, the person who left us about a year ago, first thing he said when he came was, do you realize the gold mine you have in the data you have in this university? You're just leaving it on your servers when tons of people could want to come and research and be able to conduct such there. So we're pretty heavy into that. As far as HR goes, we've been automated a long time. We've had PeopleSoft, now we've moved to Oracle, and now we're moving to gamification and such. So next play is how to put everything on the phones.
That's what Paul also referred that it's the technology side, the gamification you have adopted. So that's bringing me back to Robert here. Robert, you are into different kind of business, right? We are talking about the education here. You are dealing with the products and you are selling those products. And with all that technological advancement, cultural change, behavioral change, buying behavior which is changing, and then the regional economies which are evolving, how it's really shaping up your strategic priorities to stay relevant for the market, for the customer?
Again, that's, how long have I got? 15 hours, 16 hours? It's a big question. And if I try and make sure I bring it back to leadership and where leadership fits in with all of that, the first part is actually really understanding our customers. Understanding what the customers want today, what they will want in the future, and understanding how we need to modify and change as we go forward. We're a very global company. We sell into everything but about 6 countries, and we're in over 71 countries with subsidiaries. And we are trying to focus on the similarities between countries and understand the differences, rather than focus on the differences and understand the similarities. There's a nuance in that, but actually, as the world is developing, as the world is shrinking, things are getting much more similar. The other thing, because we're talking about the future of leadership, I probably should be honest and open with everybody. I'm trying to work out whether I'm an endangered species or a dinosaur, because I have done 33 years with one company. And I'm not sure how many people in 30 years' time will have done 33 years with one company. To answer one of Ron's questions, the one good thing that we do is my HR is in every single meeting that we have. And I think of a three-legged stool, which I think will carry on forward as you look at the future of leadership. The three-legged stool being the managing director or CEO, finance, and HR. And I think those three have to work very closely together because they drive everything. I think a lot of this, as I say, is understanding the customer. It's understanding actually the subject that follows us, I think, diversity and inclusion. So we need to be as diverse as our customer base. And our customers are global, so we need to think globally. And we need to be global. And then we need to include everybody. And we very much need to include everybody in the workforce and think about what will attract people going forward. So the whole essence of when I started work, you looked for a good company you wanted to join and stay with for a long period of time. Now I know that the 23, 24-year-olds are thinking differently. So we have to think differently. And I think the other question I'll throw out that maybe we can answer as a group is, we keep talking about the future is going to be kind of a gig economy, everybody's going to work for short periods of time. I don't think we've quite connected that with the C-suite yet. And if everybody else in the corporation is going to be gig, isn't the C-suite going to be gig as well? And what does that mean?
No, I think very interesting perspective. The customer, the focus on the customer, I think that's one of the key message. And then, because that velocity which we are talking about, or change which we are talking about, is not of the organization. The customer is the one which is now, if we go back to the Juliet presentation, the power of crowd. So the customer is going to lead how the organization should be serving them. So that's a reverse process these days. So coming to you, Stuart, you are dealing with 750,000 plus students and members across the world, and it's not a one-time qualification. You have to really, it's a lifelong journey, the CPD and everything continues. So with all these changes, how ACCA is planning or doing to keep that member student and ACCA as an organization to help the organization and member student to stay relevant for the current and the future state of leadership or future state of the business.
Right, good afternoon everyone. It's quite odd, this discussion, because Sajjeed and I have this type of discussion once a week, but not in front of an audience like this. As Sajjeed alluded to, and I completely agree with Robert, our stakeholders have made a lifelong commitment to continuous learning. That's the common thread, whether you're a 17-year-old student or a 55-year-old CFO. But of course, that's the really challenging thing, I think, at the moment about all the changes we've been talking about. So how do you, for ACCA, how do you engage that spectrum of customers, or in our case, stakeholders? That's certainly become enormously more challenging than I think it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And Robert, I just wanted to come back. I think that point about, you know, C-suite executives and the role they have to play in terms of setting the tone as leaders is really, really critical. So I would sort of be very interested to know, everyone in the room, if your managing director and C-suite colleagues were giving you a very clear idea of how they were leading change within your organization, or are they all comfortably insulating themselves? You know, there are things you would expect to see. You know, how many of your CEOs issue a blog every week? How often do they comment on other people's blogs? I mean, this is what change is now. This is how young people are interacting with one another. This is the customer experience that they are expecting, as Sajjeed said. So that's a real challenge for us within ACCA. We've heard a lot about the challenges, but I have to say I've had the dubious privilege of being one of the leads on setting ACCA's 2025 strategy. And the reassurance I can give everyone in the room is that as a leader, some of the fundamentals in setting strategy haven't changed. You know, first and foremost, you have an obligation to set out the purpose. That's not changed. Secondly, you know, you have an obligation to be very, very clear about the vision. That hasn't changed. I think what I feel has changed, because I'm doing this at the moment within the organization I work for, is what comes next is, so what are your priorities? And whereas, you know, when I started my career as a young man, I did a couple of roles as a product manager, not really talking so much about products and product development and how you get strategic advantage from your products. Now you're talking about networks and how you create platforms and how you get the users of those platforms to deliver value to other users of the platform. This is completely different. That is different. And I think that is a quantum change.
Can I? Something that occurs to me as I'm listening and thinking about organizations. I've worked in government, worked twice in universities, and worked in publicly traded organizations. And when we think about flatocracy, one of the models might be the university structure, which started in Egypt hundreds of years ago, but in Europe and in the Renaissance was evolved. Leaders come in and out of roles. Collaborators make decisions. You take a leadership role for a fixed period of time, and then you step back to your specialty, which is your passion. And there's some interesting relations that would go with that now that we have so much more specialists in knowledge areas that you really don't want to lose them for a long time. They may have a big contribution to make for a time as a leader, but that might not be their forever passion. So how could we go flatter, be more creative, and turn into a gig economy inside our own organizations? How can we create the gig assignments and make sure that fun and enthusiasm and learning is happening, and that those who are 55 get to hear the ideas of those who are younger? In an earlier company I worked with, we used to always put a person who had less than 5 years onto every project, senior steering committee. So they would sort of shake things up. It was an IT company. They would sort of shake things up by asking questions and such. But can we create a gig economy, keep the intelligence in in our organizations and be also porous to ideas that come from other places, even if it's the Renaissance or even if it's ancient Egypt.
So I think that was a wonderful concept where you tap in on talent, you pick out what you need at spot price, and then you let it go, and then you bring the new one. I think that's an interesting one. But now I'm going to put a challenging question to you. If you think about the future of the leadership, what are the 3 top things which people have to let go from the current leadership style, which are the must? If we are talking about the future leadership, what are the 3 top things which people should not be doing or should not be reflecting in their behavior? Yep, Robert, please.
I'll start. I think the first thing, I remember reading a book by Tom Peters, and one of the things he said there is the first step to innovation is to forget. So I think the first step to leadership in the future will be to forget what is irrelevant. Some of that may be the way it was done in my day. Some of it may be the way it was done without the technology. I think the second thing, and I'm going to turn it on its head and say actually understand that some things of leadership are not going to change. Your leaders still need to be visionary, your leaders still need to be able to tell a story, get people to want to follow you. Because a leader with nobody following them is somebody going for a walk on their own. Very pleasant, but not very good for leading a company. So you need to actually get those people following you. I think another thing that you will have to learn is that you do not know all of the answers. You need the experts around you who do, and those experts will change depending on the issues. And I think that the fourth thing I'll mention is really learning to listen. So listening to your organization, listening to the more junior and younger people in the organization, listening to our customers. So certainly throughout our company, and one of the things I do, whenever I travel into any of the regions of Middle East and Africa, I'll have employee breakfasts or employee coffee mornings. So for an hour, I will sit and just answer questions and get into a dialogue with everybody at all levels of the organization. And I do that so I actually know what's really going on. Because at leadership, unfortunately, everything that comes up through the hierarchy is filtered. And people take out the stuff they don't think you want to know or they don't want you to know. So it's I think, going back to understanding what's really going on in the organization and understanding what's really going on with our customers.
So the connectedness, I think that's a one of a key area. I think that was discussed this morning as well, the connectedness with the ground reality. So coming to you, Stuart, what are the 3 things which people should not be doing as a future leader?
What should we not be doing as a future leader? Well, I suppose the 2 things that come to mind are paradoxical in the sense that I think it's important to recognize that there's quite a lot that you don't know. And more importantly, there's a lot that you don't know. So that takes quite a lot of being humble. And at the same time, I think it's really important to be confident. So those things, so now we're talking about quite a high level of EQ. Because if you can be confident, be humble, and recognize that there's quite a bit you don't know, I think you're broadly on the right track as a leader at the moment with the volume of change. Now none of that is easy, is it?
Love the humility. I would say leaders need to lose the hierarchy and forget the importance that might be ascribed to it, and listen not only to those who are nearest to them, but listen to those who might be afraid to come near them in order to really understand. I think the best leadership learning that I myself enjoyed was as a volunteer in an area where people couldn't be made to do anything because you had a position, but who came together around a purpose. And so thinking in that kind of collaborative, cooperative way of engaging ideas and not having to rely on position all the time. I mean, some days you have to. You've got stockholders and so forth, but as much as possible to be engaging and collaborative and humble, and learning. And finally, this room is not representative of either the clients or the population that's here. So I'm sure that the future will be much more balanced in gender, and that leaders need to do whatever they can to make sure that we're not hiring ourselves, because that's the danger of recruiting. Your biases are built in, all of us, not your age, not your training, not your location, not your gender. And so having to take active steps to even things out, even in the broader public sense, is necessary in Pakistan.
No, thank you, Karen. I think the one thing which is coming along very, very strong, it's the humble and the authenticity. That's something which people should not let go. I think that's a very interesting question. If you go back and you ask yourself a question, what you're going to let go, it's difficult to answer. If you go and ask what you need to acquire, you can come up with a list. It's a difficult question. I think that's the first thing when we are talking about the future of leadership. That's something which we have to get used to. What we are going to let go, because the change and the velocity of change is going to drive that type of behavior that we can less down. These are the things I'm going to let go, and this is something I'm going to keep. And these are interesting questions, and I'll go back to those questions in a minute. So if we talk about what is required, what we need to acquire, right? Now we go back to the other question side of it. Some of the content we discussed here is relevant to that, what we need. So what are the top 3 things in terms of the behaviors, not the competencies, in terms of the behaviors a CEO must have, and I'm specifying the CEO side. I'm not talking about the rest of the leadership, not the board member, but somebody who's really is a face most of the time of the organization. What are something which is a must-have for CEO in terms of behaviors? So, Stuart, do you want to go back?
Well, I think I came to one of these events a year ago, and I spent quite a lot of time talking about ethics and ethicality, and I think that's absolutely critical. As a leader and as a business. So it's a demonstrable ethicality, I would say. As I said earlier, I think somebody who can excite an organization and explain and amplify the purpose and vision of an organization. And then I think probably I think in the future, partnerships generally are just going to become more and more important. Sense that with the volume of change, the quantum of change, you can do everything yourself, I think is folly. So I do think you need a leader who is capable of building and maintaining strategic partnerships.
Very well said, I think, first of all. Stuart, I wish I'd gone first. No, I think to build on that, the couple of things I would add to that, because I think it was a very good summary, I think it's authenticity. So you have to be authentic all of the time, because people are watching you all of the time as the CEO, and if you say one thing and do something else, it is really picked up. So it is about being consistent and authentic. I think the ethics is very important, and very important for all companies as we go forward, and I think will become more important as the world expands, as data is used more, because that's one of the concerns everybody has around their data. How's it being used? And then I think it is accepting that you don't have all of the answers. So it's a little bit your partnership. And being able to build those partnerships, being able to understand when you need to get collaboration, when you need to listen, and also being clear on the organization on when you are not prepared to change your thoughts or your ideas. So again, I would go back to being ethical, being compliant. You know, that to me is yes or no. There's no grayness there in there. You're either compliant or you're not. But there are other areas where you need to understand that you don't have the answers, you don't have the expertise, so you need to learn from the people around you. So the last part is to really build a strong team around you and listen to that team and work with that team.
Geez, guys, you haven't left very much. So to all of that, because I agree with all of it. Each of us have said, and I would say again, we need to be absolutely certain of our own ethics, and we need to be able to assist and enable and grow our organizations to have the same laser clarity about what's ethical and appropriate behavior, for sure. And that extends right to every kind of honesty and to being genuine, to being able to be genuine as an individual and honest as a person. To that I would add, I think, an ability to, because there's so much information, so you need to both be able to scan the horizon, figure out what it is there, and with the help of members of your team who are doing the research or feeding or helping you know, but to look at the mass amounts of information and figure out what it means for you, and at the same time, focus in on what's really important, because there's just so much coming at you, even as a CEO. I've worked with many CEOs. I've been in the C-suite since 1992. And of all the CEOs, it was the hardest thing for them, I think, and is to keep a manageable number of top priorities. So scan the horizon, be concerned about many things, but be able to focus on a few and get them done really well, and then move to the next ones. I think that's what's essential for a
I think
leader.
that's a very, very interesting point what Kara brought out, is the priorities and the choices, because going forward, there are so many opportunities and the horizon is so huge. Most of the time, the decision to make is not what to pick, is again go back to what to let go, which opportunity we should not be pursuing, at least now. There are some interesting questions from the audience. So there's a very interesting one from Maria, and that's the question: are existing upcoming leaders at risk of having overdose of technology and data? So are we talking too much data, and are we going to overdose current and the upcoming leader with that? And would it has an implication for the future leadership? Any comment on that?
Well, I have a comment on it. Yeah, I think it would be unwise to underestimate how important data and technological transformation is at the moment, because it's changing the shape of our customers, so we can't ignore it. If we keep it real, our organization, our products, we've had to invest enormously in data and technology. It's changed the shape of our balance sheet. I was having a drink with our CFO last Thursday, and he was saying, everyone hates me because all our budgets are now invested in digital and digital projects. So it would be unwise to say, we're too focused. But I think this session is really about leadership. And I guess the thing is, it's really important, I think, as leaders, that you don't get lost in the weeds, and that you've got people around you who can cut through that for you and tell you what you need to know. Now, that sounds a bit glib, but, if you're a leader, you're probably not in that organization, unless you're doing Paul's job and you're designing gamified products. You're probably not there to understand exactly what you should be doing in terms of data and technology. But would I want to run a business without somebody who could give me a good idea of what that was? Absolutely not.
In the olden days, I was a heavy reader, and I used to walk through a lot of bookstores and imagine all the things that were in the bookstore and not be able to sort it out. I say that because what we have now is amazing browsers and tools and things that can help feed us the data that we need. So the leader's answer probably would be to rely on colleagues, figure out where are the main places it needs to come from, and feed it in a way that it can be managed not only by the leader, the organization's going to need it as well. So we go from wandering through the bookstore to having what we need fed to us in a certain way and on a certain day and all of that. It's pretty exciting, actually, to be able to do that.
If I may, the additional couple of comments that spring to my mind is, one of it is leadership is, for me, for companies, leadership is trying to understand where you want to be 5 years out. So you don't have to worry too much about the next step. So it's have enough data to be able to make the decisions, absolutely endorse what's been said around making sure you've got people supporting you, providing that data, the information around you. But once you've made the decision, unless there is data that comes in and says you've made the wrong decision, kind of go with the flow and drive, because the more you change direction at the top, it may be a small step at the top, but by the time it works its way through the organization, it paralyzes the organization. And change is a very difficult thing to manage within organizations. So, there's a huge amount of science around change, there's a huge amount of focus on change and organizational change management, and never underestimate how paralyzing it can be for the organization, even if it's not going to affect them. The fact that they hear that something's changing is enough to make people worried.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I think there are a couple of questions which are around the cost, that's from the audience, cost, operations, and that's very specific to Pakistan as well, when the Pakistani business is really ready to incur that cost. So if I summarize those three questions, that comes down to one summary, that the disruption will require people to have some time to think, and then somebody has to bear the cost or take the risk there. So if we are talking about those scenarios which exist in our everyday life, what type or what the leadership role, or again I go back to very specific, what is the CEO role to really help the teams or the organization to navigate through that ambiguity of disruption and really lead the organization there? So how you feel as a CEO or a leadership skill which you have to reflect in that situation. You have a regular operations, you have a cost constraint, and you have honor or a board which is not very keen to invest in the disruption. So what is your role to keep the customer and employees relevant in today's world?
Well, one thing that's already happening is the trade-off between the investment in technology and the bricks and mortar. So we can think of several examples. I can imagine the real estate industry is going to get shifted because of what's happening with data and where people will be and such. And that would be a trade-off, right? We pay a lot for rent. We pay a lot to build buildings and heat them and light them. So maybe that is part of what will happen. One will disrupt another instead of being able to solve the problem so everyone's included, so everyone's there. But it's not going to be easy choices. On the other hand, in Pakistan, there are many, many people who are very smart about technology. And if those who are leaders and in charge don't give them way, don't listen to them, they'll be the competitors, because they'll start up things that will compete against the bigger things. So engaging is really important too.
Yeah, I think as a lot of the time actually, it's around choices and having to make those choices at the executive level and CEO level. Because it's not a bottomless pit, and you still have to make the maths work at the end of it, and certainly if you're a public listed company, make a profit and please the shareholders. So it's understanding when to invest, how to prove it, do it by pilots, when that pilot works, roll it out, and then make sure you actually implement the change through the organization. Because the time it really doesn't work very well is if you invest but you don't get the benefit. So when you do invest, work through that change management, work through the way of making people use the technology that you're bringing in so it can work.
Yeah, I suppose from a personal perspective, it's, the cost of not being able to implement change in the long term is far higher, and that's a worry. I'd love to say I work for an organization, we find implementing change dead easy. We don't. What I do think you need to do is, it does come a bit back to organizational behaviors, I think you need to be prepared to change your ways of doing things. And sometimes that means you've got to challenge the way you manage risk, some of your compliance imperatives. Perhaps you have to devolve responsibility for things to, individual units or individuals, because actually the way you did things in the past is not particularly effective. But that's entirely understandable given the amount of change that organizations are going through. So there's an element as a leader of letting go and being prepared to take some level of risk that perhaps you weren't in the past, in my view.
Thank you. If I summarize, if the conversation so far, and I'd encourage if you have any questions, please do that. Please put that on the slide. So if I summarize right now the future of the leadership, where the things will not change, which will remain the same. The one is coming out the authenticity. Other is coming out to be very, very humble and know that you don't know and create a team or experts or a network or community around you which can help you. Visionary, imagine the future, storytelling, that trait is not changing. Inclusivity, you picked up that's where the person has to be more inclusive while they are making their choices, so taking the bias out, so whether we are talking about the social mobility or gender. Another thing which is becoming more important is the prioritization, making choices and developing those criteria based on which you choose or you let go a couple of opportunities maybe. So I think these are the things which are coming out very, very strong as we speak. And the customer experience, I think it's the power of crowd. You have to get comfortable with that. It might not be yourself or your authority driving and defining the future. You have got a bigger asset which you can really leverage, which is your own customer and employees, which can become a guidance for you. Now, there's a few questions right now from the audience, which these are the skills which we are hoping that has to stay, whatever happens, so that will stay there. There are a few questions particularly from the younger lot. And the question is, what are the very specific skills which they should build as a future leader? And the second question is, how they should build that. So comment on that side. You want to start? You want to go? Okay, Robert, please.
I'll try. It's a great question. The first thing for me is understanding, actually, it's around that EQ. It's around relationship building. It's around managing and working with people. So I think the soft skills of a leader are really important and outweigh the hard skills. That's based on many people have the ability and the capability from an intellectual point of view to have the leadership role, but it's the soft skills that make the difference. One of the things to do is in any situation, you can always be a leader. So, take those opportunities when they're coming along, understand when you should be speaking up in a meeting, understand when you should be speaking up in a project, and taking that leadership role and understanding what you do, how it affects other people. So it's really focused on the soft skills is what I would say, and learn to be very good at getting the best out of the people around you as well as yourself.
Okay. So I like to call it step into the rainbow. You know how people talk about the gray area there might be between this job and that job, or this part of a project and another project? I like to think of it as a rainbow, which is an area that is unclear but is necessary to get done in order for things to work. If you stay in your silo, if you stay in your job description, if you stay in your specialty, you'll do well and you'll get to a certain point. But if you want to move up or through and into leadership, take a risk, step into the other space that's between your specialty and the next one. That's between your level and another one. That's the thing that might be getting in the way of a project. Step in there and try it and see how that works to make a project successful. I think that's a really important thing. And confidence, build your confidence. It is partly speaking up at meetings for sure. It can start with just 2 or 3, but being able to hear your voice and be comfortable with it being out there and your ideas being out there are really important skills.
Right, I suppose maybe, let's keep this one real, maybe answer it at 2 or 3 levels. I suppose, I've been fortunate, I've had a few occasions where I've had some interaction with people who have been chairmen or CEOs of big FTSE 100 organisations, and I'll start with something that's not EQ-centred. I mean, the people I've met doing those roles, their capacity for giving a very clear message about what is actually quite a complex subject is being what really struck you. And that's why they're in the job, is they can communicate complex issues really clearly. And that's a skill. So I suppose that would be one area I'd focus on. But I think the question for us, I have to put my ACCA hat on now, is because for us, one of our biggest challenges in Pakistan is, and we're going to solve it, aren't we, is the fact that there are lots and lots and lots of smart people who can pass very technically challenging exams and then really struggle to find work. And I know that everyone in the room will know why. And it's about developing these skills. And it's, as Robert said, it's EQ, it's IQ, it's global awareness. What does that mean? It's how you collaborate, how you influence, how you empathize. And that is an opportunity, I think, for Pakistan. And it's an opportunity for our stakeholders, but it's not easy to solve. And the question I finish with, well, how would I solve it? And I've got a really good example. I was introduced to a chap just as I was coming in here who is a Toastmaster. Well, there we are. What a fantastic way of developing a skill. Play team sports. There are loads of ways of developing those skills, but we just need to ease people into it, I think.
So, 2 other thoughts that come through. One is, understand that other people being successful around you is a great way to learn, and they're not in competition. So it's not a fight. So learn from everybody else around you, and linking actually to the comment about particularly getting confidence, building confidence. One of the things that I've been told and I've read up about and I've worked with in multiple countries now is around the difference between men and women at various levels in the organisation and inherent confidence that people have. So one of the things that's been explained to me is that a man feels he's got the capability of about 30 to 40% of the job, and they will go for the job because they're confident they'll learn the rest on the job. Whereas women want to have 70% confidence before they go for it. So in all environments, try and help other people around you to be successful and to build confidence. Because actually, leaders are really good at bringing people on. It's not only about you, it's about everybody around you. And the most successful leaders that I know are really good at building their teams and really good at promoting people and helping people to get other roles. So it's take that more holistic view and not just think about yourself.
No, thank you. And I'll just make one comment, and then I'll ask you for the final comment, so we will be just closing it. The one thing which Stuart referred to, that there's a competency framework within ACCA. That's a great tool, and I'm sure that every other organization have got great tools. But the challenge which we face is the habits. And habits are something which defines your identity and your leadership styles. We as a nation, as a society, as a school, if we talk very specific to Pakistan, we are not very aware and keen to build those habits which create a different kind of identities. So the first effort for any young person who's really want to get into the leadership one is coming out to building those habits, whether we are talking about authenticity, we're talking about ethical thinking, always having growth mindset. These are the habits you have to build, and that's create the identity. And there are a lot of resources in today's world which is available globally, internet, and it's very accessible. Another four personas which World Economic Forum picked up, and from a future leader perspective, they picked up one social super who really connect with the purpose and connect with the people, and they try to do the public good always, and that's their driving factor. So that's one type of future leader. Then we are looking at the data-driven, decisive leader who are really relying on the data and the information, and they are driving the decisions there. Then they are disruption driver. They challenge everything which even they are doing, and they talk about the 10x. If I'm doing it something right now in a one way, I have to improve it by 10x. And then they are talent champion, like Robert mentioned. They are may not be as talented as we would like them to see, but they know how to build the talent around them. So if I go in a World Economic Forum categorization, so some of the personas or the traits which we are discussing here, that's also reflective on the personas which the World Economic Forum came up as well. So I'll recommend everybody that do look at those competency framework of ACCA or persona on the World Economic Forum side. So that will give you the context, and a lot of things which we are discussing here, they have structured there as well as a part of the research. So any final comment or any final question you can send to Slido. So I'm still, we have got 2 minutes. So if you can make any summary, anything which is in your opinion for the future of the leadership, that's something which is the most critical thing people should remember. You want to start, Carol?
Okay. So thinking not only about our own companies, our own agencies in this room, but thinking a little more bigger than that. The population here in Pakistan and in South Asia, and also in Africa as well, is going to be a majority young, a majority youth, at a time when the corporations are going to figure out, as we've been seeing, that there are ways to automate and not to have those entry-lot jobs. Cars won't even need drivers. I mean, so many things will go. We're really going to need to be creative. So we should all try and figure out how to increase our creativity by whatever means we do that. And that generally is not in, accounting and such. It's probably in broadening out in theater, in music, in books, in novels, to be able to think differently and make connections back to the work from that kind of thinking. And second thing I would say that I've learned about Pakistan that I think is tappable is the incredible entrepreneur spirit. If there is something business-like that is at the heart of the culture here, it's entrepreneurial. And that also is part of the creativity that needs to be tapped. And I think people kind of separate it out. They may come from families that are in their own business, but think, I better think like my company and not like that. So how do we tap that all the time and make it connect to creativity? This is a very also artistic country as well. So how do we put that all together in order to do the different things that need to be done for the future? I think Pakistan has lots to teach the rest of the world. And everybody in the rest of the world is not hearing that side, that positive side.
Well, as you heard earlier, I'm also a big advocate for the talent in the country. But I would say creative thinkers make very good accountants.
No, I didn't mean... I'm sorry.
Just saying. I'm just saying. So I think...
It's always a danger to step up.
I think I'll finish on a pragmatic note, I guess, which is we all know, particularly those of us who are parents, that if you think about the next 20 years, there are going to be more people and fewer jobs. So this is a discussion about leaders. So I think the number one priority as a leader is what I think about is how do I identify and attract and retain the talent I need? And that's what it's all about. Yeah.
So the last just a couple of comments or thoughts from my side. One is utilize the best coach that you've got, which if you do it right is yourself. Because you're with yourself all of the time, but be constructively critical about what you do well, what you don't do well, and that drives you into a continuous learning mode of mindset, and have that mindset to always improve. Because if you're doing it as well, it helps you to be better, but it helps everybody else around you get better as well. And then The last thing I would just throw out there is be a little bit careful for what, when you're asking for something, because you might get it. So, if you want to become a CEO, understand what that means before you get there, because it may be too late once you are there. And there are demands, there are challenges, there are a lot of things that come with that. And you can make a huge impact without necessarily being at the CEO level. So just be careful what you ask for, because you do sometimes get it.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Robert. The good news for us is something which is not going to change. So ethics are not going to change. Authenticity is not going to change. Humbleness is not going to change. Inclusivity is not going to change. So the fundamentals, if we talk about for the future, that are going to stay. And listening specifically, one of a skill if we don't have, that will require, we will need more. Power of crowd, the customer guiding us and taking those feedback and incorporating that in the business operations or the response to the change. Except these, everything is going to change in the next 12 months or 24 months. So if you have these fundamentals ready with you and you are willing to go through that journey and you have that prioritization capability as a right capability, so you are ready for the future, because that's the future is. It's very, very uncertain, ambiguous. So you need to work on the habits, and you have to demonstrate that habits on an everyday basis. Stay connected and keep it real and authentic. And that's what the future of the leadership will look like. The rest, the change is mandatory. We don't have to manage it. We have to flow with that, navigate in a real time, hire the talent at spot price. I love that one. That's the future. We are not looking for 35 years jobs. We are looking for people who are coming and they have to lead first themselves, because when we talk about there will not enough jobs, we still think 9 to 5, but there will be enough work which you can really do as an entrepreneur. And that's a different kind of leadership which you have to reflect in yourself, where you have to lead your habits and the discipline side of it. So I think there are more good news, and the rest we don't know, so we don't care. We will flow with the change, and we will create opportunities with that. So thank you, panel. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for such a great audience.